this idea of hard versus soft skills is totally unhelpful.
From the Amplified Growth Studios in Alexandria, Virginia, this is Association Chat with your host, Kiki L'Italien. So I guess my first big question for you is, why this topic, Jeff? What's the big deal? What's the big deal about the future of learning and work?
Well, I mean, for me personally, the issue is I have a briefing coming up at the end of June on the future of learning and work for association decision makers. That's on June 28th at 2:00, and it's an issue of great importance to me for that reason. But also, I think it's an issue of great importance for associations because, on the one hand, this is an area where associations really should be well positioned to be influential, right? To be playing a role in how the future of learning and work is shaped. And yet, at the same time, I feel like associations, many of them, maybe most of them, aren't quite there yet, and need to be thinking about how learning and work are going to shift over the course of, say, the next 10 to 12 years, say between now and 2030. And what they're going to need to do to prepare their stakeholders for that. So what I spoke about at GSAE last week was not this topic per se, but actually about the topic of developing a foresightly perspective, which is so important for our stakeholders. So what I thought we would do today is go through this topic using the framework, the 6 attributes, if you will, of developing a foresightly perspective to frame this up a little bit and help the people who are watching now, people who are going to watch the recording, think about this in a way that really does 2 things. One, gives them some insight into issues related to the future of learning and work, but also helps them see how they can apply the thinking around developing a foresightly perspective to any issue, really, and use that for their benefit.
Now, I want to alert people who are watching this or listening to this episode, if you're listening to it later, that there are previous episodes where Jeff is on here and he's talked about some other aspects of having a foresightly perspective. And so I would encourage you, when I go back in the show notes, I will link to those different episodes so that you're able to go back and check out some of those previous episodes. They're really, really good. But Jeff, okay, so let's jump into this. What's the best way to attack it? Like, should we go with the first of the 6, or what do you think?
Yeah, we'll just go through them. I'll do one at a time. We can stop and talk about it. So, the other thing I'll just mention too is I'll make sure for show notes, Kiki, that I've written an article actually for GSAE for their magazine on this topic, and I can send you that article and you can provide that to people as a resource as well.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm going to try to talk a little bit louder here. It looks like my mic might not be picking me up very well.
Okay.
So I'll work on that.
So the first attribute of a foresightly perspective is discard orthodoxy, right? And that's really all about looking at the deep-seated assumptions that we've been making, the deep-seated assumptions about how the world works, and then questioning them, challenging them, getting beyond those orthodox beliefs to recognize what's happening all around us and establish a new belief system that prepares us for the future. And I think that there are, when it comes to the issue of learning and work, I think there are a number of orthodoxies that we have to look at. I think the first one is one that is not unfamiliar for people who've heard me over the years talk about this. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think it's really important for us to think past the orthodoxy of membership, because the issues around learning and work, when it comes to the impact of automation, the impact of artificial intelligence, the need for us to be working better with machines, and all the disruption that is likely to occur, and some measure of disruption will occur, whether it'll be a dystopian disruption or whether it'll be something less than that, it remains to be seen. But there's no question we're all going to have to be better at working with machines.
Right.
So really the assumption we have to stop making is that this is a membership issue. It's a stakeholder issue, right? We have stakeholders who are going to be affected by this. Some of them are first degree stakeholders, they're members. Some of them are not that. They are second or third degree stakeholders, but nothing changes, right? The automation is not going to respect the boundaries that we create around membership. So we have to help all of our stakeholders prepare, regardless of whether they happen to be members of the association at any given moment in time. So I think that's one thing, is that the Orthodox beliefs we hold around membership will actually make it harder for us to support our stakeholders' learning and prepare them for a different future of work. I
So
think.
that's
Go ahead.
can I dig into that a
Yeah,
little
of
bit
course.
more?
Yeah,
Okay, so when you're saying we're thinking past the orthodoxy of membership, that's like a traditional type of membership, and maybe thinking about the people that would be you'd be serving in like the industry and like the community. I mean, help me. Is that what you're talking about here?
yeah. Well, I mean, let's take for example, what's going on in the legal profession right now, right? The legal profession is looking very seriously at how technology is going to replace some of the work that is currently done by paralegals, by junior attorneys, and this can't be seen as an issue of who's a member of the bar association, or who's a member of this legal specialty group. It has to be looked upon. This is happening to the entire profession.
Industry,
Right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
same thing is happening in accounting, right?
right.
Accounting is recognizing that many of the activities of accountants, right, of auditors as well, many of the core financial work that they've done historically is going to be automated, right? It's already being automated. And so they have to prepare people who work in that field to be able to adapt, to contribute in different ways, and to learn what is required to be successful in that environment. That is not a membership issue, right?
Right.
It's everybody who is a certified public accountant. It's everybody who's an auditing professional. And so we can, it doesn't mean we don't, again, I always want to remind people, it's not to say we don't have members.
Right.
It's to say that the future of learning and work will not be defined along the boundaries that we have set up for ourselves.
Right.
Right? And we have to respect the fact that these forces are stronger than any of the boundaries that we've created.
That's, I think that right there is worth thinking about a little bit, because I can imagine being an executive director, sitting back, listening to them, as a membership director, uh, and thinking, okay, I already have, I'm taxed with trying to do so much. I wonder if my board is going to appreciate me coming to them and saying that I need to focus on serving this entire industry. I've got so much on my plate. And I know that there are a lot of people who they're worried about. They might think this is great, but they may feel like this is beyond the scope of what they're prepared to be able to do. So for that pushback, what do you have to say?
Well, and I think actually it's an interesting point because it actually relates to another orthodoxy
Mm-hmm.
that I think we have to address, right? Which is the orthodoxy of time versus attention.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think often the argument that you're proposing is one that is based in part on time. It's also based in part on resources. But we tend to focus a lot on, do we have the time to do these things that are necessary? And I think we have to start. It doesn't mean we don't look at the time, right? It's not an
Hmm.
either or choice. It's a how do we place the emphasis choice. And increasingly, the emphasis has to be placed on the attention issue. How are we allocating our attention? And are we allocating our attention to activities that will prepare us for the future? Or are we allocating our attention to activities that are really about sustaining what we already have in place, optimizing the status quo, right?
Hmm.
And what that becomes is that's a more pragmatic way of expressing the deeper concern, which is are we doing things that enable us to cope with what's going on? Or are we doing things organizationally and individually that allow us to adapt to what is happening? And I think we need more focus on shifting our attention toward adaptation rather than trying to manage our time and simply figuring out ways to cope with what's happening. Because the issue that I think a
Yeah.
lot of I think the issue that I think a lot of executive directors will face is that are they going to be the ones to shift the organization toward the future, or are they going to hand it off to their successor,
Right.
or will they hand it off to someone else who will then in turn hand it off to someone else? How much longer will we wait until we start adapting toward the future? And on this issue in particular, on the issues of the future of learning and work, there's no time to be waiting any longer to be handing it off to someone else another 3 or 5 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and I love that point too, because I think that so many of us are in that it, we think about time versus attention, and we think that it has to be a certain way, but there are other ways to address the issue of those things that we need to pay attention to. And sometimes, I think that we default into thinking that it's a time question when
Yeah,
maybe it's not. So,
yeah,
all right.
and it's easy to it's understandable why we do that, right?
Yeah.
Because what we're used to doing, right?
Yeah.
We're acclimated to handling it that way. Everything we run our lives based on time, right? Based on watches and calendars and our phones and everything. And unfortunately, what that has actually done in the digital era, it has fragmented our attention so greatly that we still think about it in terms of time rather than the allocation of attention resources. And so we
Yeah.
actually, from a learning perspective, we are actually exacerbating this problem by, more and more events, learning events, are offering, 5 minute sessions, 15-minute sessions,
Right.
30-minute sessions, because they are actually saying, well, people's attention is so fragmented, so let's play into that, right? And again, I don't want to suggest that it's a terrible thing to do that. What I'm saying is that we need to have more balance and say,
Right.
you know what, 5 and 15 and 30-minute sessions don't necessarily offer the learning that we need. We need to find other ways to give people the deeper learning that's required for them to be able to adapt for the future.
That's so interesting that you bring that up, because I've had this on my mind a little bit since the I was listening to the Apple keynote yesterday, and the stuff that came out where both Apple and Google talked about the ways that they are building into new operating systems and stuff, how to rein in and sort of control the time that we spend
Mm-hmm.
on our devices.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting that even the purveyors of these devices, that the idea is that we get hooked, that we get drawn in, that we use them all the time. Even they're saying, yeah, so at this at this unhealthy
Right.
extent, it actually is counterproductive for us. We need to, I actually think that's a brilliant idea, that they're recognizing that by instead pulling people back from that so much and refocusing on ways that they can become embedded health wise, so that people can't afford to be away from it. Um,
Well,
away from the devices.
the research is very strong on this because we know the addictive properties of phones are built to be addictive.
Yeah.
The research is very strong. There's, excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. The research shows they did a research study with some students,
Uh-huh.
university students, and there were three different things that they had one group of students who were in a room where their phones were in front of them.
Hmm.
And then they were asked to be doing a task so they could see their phones. Then there was another group where the phones were in the room but not near them, right? And
Hmm.
then there was a third group where the phones were in a completely different room, right?
Wow.
And the performance of that last group was dramatically higher than the first group,
Yeah.
right? So if your phone is with you, even if it's turned over,
Yeah.
right, and you're not looking at the screen, the very presence of the phone has a dramatically negative effect on your ability to concentrate and focus on completing tasks. Whereas when your phone is totally somewhere else, right, totally in another space, not anywhere near you, your ability to concentrate is dramatically increased.
I totally believe that. I totally believe it. And people didn't believe it. When you and I both work for ourselves, and so people couldn't believe it when I said that there are days when I take my cell phone and I put it in a totally different room
Mm-hmm.
when I have to get something done, because it shouldn't be that I get, like, I know that,
Yeah.
my daughter, she's in grade school. Yes, the school could call. I understand, but I also have a husband who could take that call. And also, once upon a time, we didn't have cell phones. My mom was a school teacher. Nobody could come pick me up. And you know what? I survived. So it'd be
Right.
okay. It'd be all
And
right.
just to give you a sense of how prevalent this is, since you and I have been having this conversation, my phone has rung 3 times,
Gosh.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've had to hit decline each time while we're having our conversation. So there's one other orthodoxy that I just want to quickly talk about before we move on,
Hmm.
which is and it's a long-standing orthodoxy that is outside of associations, but it's an important one. This idea of hard versus soft skills is totally unhelpful, right? It's totally unhelpful today
Why? Why?
because the things that are most important in a world in which people are going to have to work better with machines are not soft, right?
Right.
This is not semantics. This is actually drawing an important distinction among the skills that people need to develop, right? There are technical skills which are I don't mean that in a technology sense. I mean that what are the technical skills of being a lawyer
Yeah.
or the technical skills of being in manufacturing or being in healthcare, right? What are the things you need to know to be able to function in a specific industry or profession? Then there's the digital skills, right, which we all have to develop. How do we get better at using technology? What technologies apply specifically to our fields, or just generally? How do we use technology better? And in some cases, for example, in some field, maybe now that's coding, right? Do we have to be better at coding?
Right.
And then there's the human skills, and those human skills like creativity and empathy and imagination and innovation and communications. These are not soft, right?
Hmm.
These are the skills that will distinguish us from artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning applications. These are the things that robots and AI will not be able to do for the foreseeable future in the way that human beings do them. And so, this idea that these are soft skills is a huge misnomer. So, we have to drop this orthodoxy of it's hard versus soft. It's not, it's technical and digital and human, some combination. And that combination will change over time, right? It'll become more important for us to have those human skills because even sometimes more so than digital skills because technology over time, AI, will become better, for example, at coding and programming than a human being could be. So what will really make the difference for us is how effective are we at using our human capabilities, uniquely human
Wow.
capabilities.
Wow. Okay. So I love hearing that because that is kind of something that is, I mean, historically, that was where the humans were able to really rise through our artistic pursuits, through, you think of people like Michelangelo, you think about Da Vinci, you think about people who they were more than just an artist, right? They were inventors and they studied all kinds of different things. And through the industrialization, through this idea of building factory worker mindsets, a lot of the creativity, the curiosity, and those things that are really, I think, like the tool sets of what makes us stand out with our imaginations, our ability to think beyond and to envision new possibilities. That's going to be something that we really need to invest in because, and now, like right now, because having that, sort of factory worker mentality, it's not, we can't afford to just do that now. Now we need to think in more creative ways.
That's right. And the issue that, I think really comes up, and there's a great new book out called Prediction Machines by three professors at the University of Toronto, and they're applying an economic framework to artificial intelligence. And their basic premise is that, what AI, machine learning, deep learning makes cheaper is prediction, right? And what prediction is finding information that is missing from the information that you have, right?
Right.
And so you make predictions, right? It's what AI does very well, right? AI looks at information and makes predictions about what it means based on having been trained by other data sets. And what that makes more important when you reduce the cost of prediction, right? And your dog agrees, is it makes judgment so much more valuable, right? And that's a human capability, right? That's a fundamental human capability. So we have to improve our judgment. We have to improve our creativity, our imagination, all the things that we are better than machines at right now, and will be at least for a while, right? There may come a point in time when artificial intelligence breakthroughs really do make machines better at that, or at least as good as we are. But I don't foresee that happening for a while, and no one really does. So, as part of the future of learning and work, we have to help, instead of trying to prepare our stakeholders for just the narrowly technical capabilities that they need, we need to help them develop these human capabilities, because as time moves on, that is what will make them future ready for whatever happens as technology unfolds. I'm not hearing you, Kiki. You put yourself on mute.
I think I got myself off mute now.
You're off
my
mute.
dog, my dog is like really, I think she's like dreaming or something, and I don't know how to reach her. But anyway, yeah, no, it's so if your board member comes to you and says something like, I want to move into the future, but should I focus on, I should probably focus on coding, right? Or do I need to work on building my imagination and creativity? I mean, is it all of the above? Is it focused more on how you can apply your creativity and, I would say, and curiosity to areas where you have strength already? Or, I mean,
Yeah, I don't think your board member needs to learn how to code.
I hope not. I really hope not.
Only because they're probably not going to need that. I mean, it's not,
No.
nothing is going to be bad about them understanding
Yeah.
technology. I mean, certainly we all have to understand technology, but I don't think we need to turn our board members into coders.
No.
And even for our kids, coding might be fun for them. It'll help them develop a familiarity with technology. But as I said earlier, eventually, and it's already happening,
Yeah.
AI will be far better coders
Oh, I'm waiting for it. I really am desperate for that to take
Yeah.
place. Yeah.
And we're already having applications that are being written by AI. So
Yeah.
familiarity with technology in every aspect is beneficial because it helps shape your mindset. But it's not really about trying to create, in my view, a huge generation of coders, because within the next decade, within that 10 to 12-year time frame, we're going to be seeing a lot more technology developed directly, using AI as the basis for that.
So how does this impact, our associations today and some of the people who are listening right now, who, when it comes to this particular orthodoxy of hard versus soft skills, how would they take what you're saying right now and apply it in their minds of their association's relation to work and learning?
So I think it goes back to something I said a minute ago, and I'll make it more specific, which
Mm-hmm.
is, if you've got an industry certification, right, or a certificate,
Right.
or some kind of credential that you're offering to your stakeholders, you want to take a hard look at how much of what you are training them on is
Mm-hmm.
actually a target for automation, right?
Yeah. Oh, well,
Because if you look at it at the level of activities and tasks, right, what are the things that they are asked to do in order to earn that credential, that certification, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, how much of that could eventually be automated, right? And should we be training them on something that within 5 or 10 years will
Yeah.
actually set them up to be removed from the system, from the process, because technology will
Oh,
take over, and instead design those credentials
yeah.
to balance the technical aspects with the human aspects.
I just had a really interesting discussion about something related to this the other day with Amy Dufresne from HRCI. She's the executive director of the HR Certification Institute. And she's been really focusing on this question because obviously, if you're executive director of HRCI and it's all about certifications, she's very, very interested in what the results are, because people all over this industry are saying, okay, what if this skill is then automated? This credential is worth what at this point? Like, you need to, if you really care about the people who are going through and getting this, you do want to make sure that they're prepared. So that's absolutely, I know people are focused on that.
Well, and just to sort of shift gears a little bit to the second attribute of the foresightly perspective, which is clarify orientation. I think, what we want to do in terms of clarifying our orientation is make sure we're adopting a holistic perspective on how all this is going to unfold, right? Because it's not just about the technology, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
also the future of learning and work will not just be shaped by tech, although tech will be, I think, the most significant influencer, the most significant force. It will also be shaped by, an aging workforce
Mm-hmm.
and economic inequality, and just the whole demographic shift of our society. All these forces are going to influence who it is who we're talking about in terms of learners.
Yeah.
What it is they're going to want and need to learn, how they will choose to learn. But I think the main thing we want to look at in associations is how can we shift the focus of learning away from incidental learning to intentional learning? How do we make learning an intentional activity for the stakeholders that we're trying to serve
Ooh.
today and going forward, rather than something that is incidental that comes up when they get a brochure in the mail, hey, or when they get an email, right? Whatever method of communication, and they show up at an event. How do we challenge them and encourage them to focus their attention on learning as an intentional activity every day that helps them prepare themselves to adapt to the realities of this shifting marketplace.
Oh, you know who I wonder if she's still watching right now. You know who that makes me think of? Uh, and I don't know if it's Heather, if it's you, or if it's Nick who's on from Q Career, but so have you talked with Heather from Q Career?
No.
Heather Wentzler. Uh, Brilliant. Okay, so Q Career exists to bring the education of different associations to fill the skills gap that exists for people in different industries, and connect associations with the people who are searching. They're starting with like students entering the workforce, but they're also looking at people who need to quickly learn new skills to move from one career to another. So looking at people in career transition, but which is really kind of an interesting concept. You guys should probably get together. But Oh, hey, Nick. Yeah, I was going to say, I bet you have some interesting things to say about this, some interesting insights about how people could move from incidental to intentional learning, because that's definitely something that that I know that is something that they look at pretty regularly. I think Gucci, my poodle, I think she just had a nightmare. I don't know. But she's awake now, so that's good.
I mean, I think it's really it's developing an orientation that is a future orientation rather than, as I said earlier, how do we optimize the status quo? How do we optimize what we already have? And again, that's tempting to say, okay, we've got something that is working pretty well, if not excellently, so let's just keep doing that instead of what we really need to do, which is how do we continuously disrupt what we already have and continue to adapt toward a future state that is always shifting. We all have to work together to author this, right? And unfortunately, that is not something that is always the top priority for many associations. Not all. Some are there. Some are doing it, right? But it is not yet a widespread effort, I think, to really rethink this in a way where we make that shift every day, not just getting ready for another 2 or 3 years from now, but starting right now to start making it happen.
Do you have any examples offhand of associations who seem to be doing that right, or is that something that you might be able to share with me offline? Because I'd be curious to know kind of some good examples to look at of organizations who are choosing to focus in that direction.
Well, I think the accounting profession is doing a pretty good job of this. I mean, certainly. Stuff that I see coming out of Maryland Association of CPAs, even AICPA, I think they're doing a good job of maybe not the entirety of the accounting profession, but certainly within the accounting profession, MACPA is a good example of this. They are making a big effort to help accountants become future ready.
That's smart. That's so smart for them to do that.
Yeah, and it's essential because, as I said earlier, it's all the automation in accounting is already happening.
Right. So we've talked about the thinking past the orthodoxy of membership. We've talked about the orthodoxy of time versus attention. We've talked about hard versus soft skills, which are more than just semantics. So what are some of the other things that we need to be looking at?
So we've talked about discarding, just go back to the attributes of a foresightly perspective. We talked about discarding orthodoxy. We talked a little bit about clarifying orientation. The third attribute is displaying humility, right?
Okay.
And I think this is important on 2 levels. One, and really it's the same idea, but expressed in a slightly different fashion. So for learners, right, which is all of us. The phrase "I don't know" has felt like something you never say, because you don't want to be seen as ignorant, right? You don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
seen as, well, how can you say you don't know, right? You're being paid here, right, to
Yeah.
know, right? And yet, instead of looking at "I don't know" as an admission of failure, I think we have to start seeing it as an edge for preparing for the future. And so, having the humility to say, look, I don't know what the right answer is here, but I'm going to, or and might be better, and I'm going to find out what it is.
Yeah.
And investing yourself in doing that. For the person who is organizing learning activities, the learning person in the association, the question you want to be asking yourself is, how can we find ways to put our learners in more situations where they have to display humility, right?
Mm.
Because by displaying humility, getting comfortable with that, they will build their capacity to do that all the time, right? That's making the shift from incidental learning to intentional learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so helping them into situations where they have to say, look, I don't know the answer, but I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to use my network. I'm willing to pursue my learning to,
Oh.
to figure out what the answer is. That makes people more comfortable with being able to do that day in and day out, which is what we need them to do.
So I have to wonder, what are some of the ways that people can encourage others to do that? Like, what are some of the exercises or practices, or, I mean, and how, I don't know, how do you know how much of that humility, Jeff, do we really need? I feel like I don't know a lot. So like I feel like I'm forever saying I don't know. But yeah, to say I don't know, and I think even a step further in that finding out I don't know and I'm going to find out is acknowledging that you need the help of others, maybe that
Absolutely.
collaboration piece, that's the part I think I can get pretty comfortable with I don't know. I think it's that next piece where it's, if I have to move beyond Google and books and stuff like that, where I have to actually ask other human beings for help, where sometimes I struggle. I'm getting better at it, but I
Well, yeah,
struggle.
I mean, I think it's hard for all of us.
Yeah.
No one really wants to ask for help, right? I mean, and there's actually, been some research. I saw an article recently that talked about that, right? Where it's hard for us um, to ask other people, ask our coworkers or friends for help. And yet it's exactly the thing we need to start figuring out how to do more often,
Yeah.
because no one of us is as smart as all of us, right? And that's something we've been saying for a long time, and yet we've now finally reached the point where I think we're starting to realize that in a world in which automation and artificial intelligence is increasingly present, our one of our best ways of being able to stay involved in the process over the long term is our ability to say, you know what, AI knows a lot about this or that, or it can do this or that better than I can. But what I can do is I can admit the fact that I don't know something and then talk to a lot of other people and use information I get from them as well as other sources to develop an answer to something that takes into consideration more than what AI can do. So it's a big shift, but it's a necessary one, and one we have to practice. Right. That's the reason why I'm saying that if we can create situations where our learners are given the chance to practice this, it'll be easier for them to do that when they're actually at work on a day in day out basis.
So here's a good question from Michael. He says, "What do you see as the role responsibility lines of CEOs and board chairs moving forward in this process?"
Honestly, I don't know, and I'm not saying that to illustrate the point. I'm saying that with all candor. I don't know because I think that here, what I'm talking about is less about what goes on at the board level, although I think that's certainly important for that, and more about how we think about this as an organizational activity, right? How do we support learning with the stakeholders we're trying to serve? Certainly, I think it's necessary for CEOs and boards and board chairs to be able to say, you know what, we don't know the answer to these questions, right? These are complicated, complex questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do we prepare ourselves to be better at addressing them, right? If what we are being asked to bring to the table is our judgment, then we have to prepare ourselves to be able to exercise that judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I don't know that I have it fully thought through.
Okay, so where are we headed next, Jeff? We've talked about this displaying humility and being able to say, I don't know, and I'm going to find out. Maybe looking at ways to build humility so that people can move from the incidental to intentional learning.
Yeah. And so I think that the next attribute is nurturing curiosity, right? Nurture curiosity.
Yay! My favorite topic ever. I love that. Yes.
And I mean, so much of the learning we're going to have to do going forward is going to be into things that maybe we don't have a special interest in, right? But we are all curious. We just have to reconnect with that curiosity, right? So we have to look upon curiosity as the energy source for our motivation to learn, right? And part of curiosity, by the way, is empathy, right? Empathy and curiosity are related. Curiosity, in the broadest sense, is about the entire world. Empathy is about curiosity about people, right? A curiosity about what's happening with them and the ability to relate to that. And so nurturing curiosity in our learners will help them do a better job of using their attention effectively, right? So, I'm really excited about artificial intelligence. I'm really excited about autonomous vehicles. Not everyone is, right? And so, but nevertheless, people have to learn about things even if they're not excited about them, right? And so the more that we can help them develop that natural, or reconnect with that natural curiosity, the better off they will be in this environment. Bringing that curiosity to bear every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're preaching to the choir. I think I've shared before on here about my passion for learning and how I actually had to rebuild my curiosity purposefully because I was reading a book by Michael Gelb, and it was about there's a lot of books by him and you should check him out. But anyway, the very first attribute that you were supposed to explore so that you could think more like Leonardo da Vinci was this development of curiosity. And as I read through this very first chapter, I recognized that how little I asked why and how and where. Like, I just didn't ask, and I depended so much on assumptions that it just, I lost that curiosity, and because of that, I had stopped learning in the way that I used to, so that I wasn't able to bring any new fire to any of the work that I was doing. And once I started building slowly, like challenging myself to ask questions of everyone I met, whether I really wanted to or not, or whether I really thought I was interested or not, it's like it opened the entire world. And so I think that if anybody's out there and like listening to this and thinking, I'm curious enough, or I don't know how this applies, I can say for sure that once I started consciously working on that, that's when association chat got more interesting. That's when so much had started taking off, because I started learning again. And you get better. You get better at asking questions. You get better at digging into it, and it fires up. I love how you put it. You said curiosity is the energy source for our motivation to learn, and I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think that, the reason why it's fourth in my attributes is because I think before you get to that, right, you've got to, as you said, you've got to kind of clear out those assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And then you guess, okay, now that I'm clear of my assumptions, how do I want to orient myself to this issue, right? What's my perspective on this? And how do I bring the humility to bear in being able to say, look, I don't know everything there is to know, or even anything that there is to know about this issue. And then once you've done those things, then you can really aim your curiosity, right? You can target your curiosity more effectively toward, okay, well, here's where I want to pursue learning in something that maybe I don't know anything about, and maybe I don't have a real burning interest in it, but I need to understand it, right? Because it's going to have an effect on me. And by tapping into that curiosity, it will sustain your motivation over time, and perhaps you will discover that you actually do have a real passion for it, or maybe not, but it's okay, right? It doesn't necessarily matter that if you have a particular passion for a specific subject. The issue is, can you use that the real passion that we want to encourage in people in this changing world of work is the passion for learning. And the curiosity piece will really help with that, if we can reconnect with it.
Yeah. I think back to why our society jumped forward, at different points in history. And I always go back to that, the same Stephen Johnson book, where it's talking about where innovation comes from. And it was talking about like the coffee houses and how important they were, because they brought people of all types of life, all walks of life, all different professions, all different, expertise, and they brought them together in one place. And so when those people talked, when they had these conversations, they were able to apply all kinds of different knowledge from all different types of areas. And so now we have the internet, we have the ability to jump in and explore in all kinds of different areas. But what we've lost between then and now is the curiosity to explore. And so for some people are just naturally good at that. But for some of us, that was kind of, as we get older, we just have naturally gotten less curious about it. And I think in some ways, the technology that we have available to us has made it both easier and harder, because things are served to us so that we're only actually seeing more and more the things that we already have shown that we're interested in, whether it be perspectives, philosophies, or the types of things that we search for. What our search engines and everything have gotten really good at is serving us the information that it thinks that these different machines think that we're looking for what we've taught them that we're looking for. So we have to purposefully, intentionally break beyond that and maybe search purposefully outside of that, right?
Yeah, and I think I just was going to the Google homepage there, because the I'm feeling lucky button on Google search, is it applies to a couple of the attributes. One of them is curiosity, right? I'm gonna pursue this search in a way where I'm gonna see what happens. And yeah, and I think that the reason why we lose our curiosity is because we are told, often from a very early age, curiosity killed the cat, right?
Yeah.
And being curious is seen as weird. Being curious is seen as dangerous. And so therefore, a lot of people just lose sight of their curiosity. They lose track of it. But I know that all living beings are curious, because at some point in time, everything is new,
Right.
right? And as I always like to say, if you doubt that for 1 second, go on Facebook and look for puppy versus doorstop videos.
I don't think I've ever looked for that.
Because every puppy that interacts with the doorstop doesn't know what they're looking at, doesn't have any idea what it will do to them, right? How it will snap back on them, and yet they do it anyway because it's new and they're curious about it, right? And that and that's, to me, that's all the evidence I need to know that every living being, human or otherwise, is curious. And we need to nurture that curiosity in ourselves, to use it, right, effectively, for our benefit and also for the benefit of others.
How do you nurture that in yourself? I mean, I'm turning this and I'm focusing it on you for a second, but how do you apply this? Because I know that you take these things very seriously. How are you applying the same thing to yourself? How do you try to develop your curiosity?
I try to, I think one way that I try to do that is by having a lot of sources of information that I'm looking at. So I'm still looking at my feeds on Feedly, every day, and looking for things in those feeds that capture my attention, that I might not otherwise see. So I've got a lot of stuff going there, and I'm scanning it all the time, regularly, to try to find things that if I didn't track it in that way, I might miss. And that's just one thing that I do. I try to do every day to see what's out there that I should be looking at, to try to better understand whatever issues are important. So that's one thing that I regularly do.
Wonderful. Well, as we're rounding out the hour, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit, maybe one last piece that you want people to take with them before we let them go for the week, and a little bit more about the future of work and learning for associations.
So there's two final attributes that I'll just touch on briefly, which is pursue discovery and embrace serendipity.
Ooh,
right?
Those look good.
And pursue discovery is about a deeper kind of learning than the traditional, sort of incidental learning, right? It's more intentional, which is about, it challenges us to reconsider our worldview. And discovery is a kind of learning in which we are making sense of things, making meaning around things, and making decisions around things on an ongoing basis. It's a cycle that we're going through over and over again. Serendipity is not so much about chance as it is about finding something you didn't expect, but you saw it because you were paying attention. And I think, those, when it comes to the future of learning and work, all of these attributes, and particularly these last three, are things that we want to nurture in ourselves as learners, and we also want to nurture them in the learners that we serve. Helping them be more curious, helping them pursue discovery, helping them embrace serendipity. That will prepare all of us to be better equipped to operate effectively in a future of learning and work that is going to look very different than the world we find ourselves in today.
Wow. I don't know about all of you, but Jeff, this has been an amazing discussion, and it always is. But I mean, this one really, I think that I wish everybody would listen to this. Actually, I think it's so helpful for just the individual, but definitely if you're in a position where you're supposed to be helping professionals in any industry, in any profession, to move forward or to do better or to lead better lives in the future, or lead the organization in a better way, you have to be teaching people more about how to embrace these different aspects, these 6 aspects. So where can people get more information, Jeff?
So if people are interested in the June 28th briefing, they can shoot me an email, and I'm happy to send them information, foresightfirst@gmail.com. And it's June 28th at 2 o'clock Eastern Time,
Okay.
On the future of learning and work. And if anyone's interested, just shoot me an email at foresightfirst@gmail.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we leave, I want to give a shout out. I didn't do this at the very front end, but I want to give a shout out to Fontiva, the AMS for Innovation, for their ongoing support of Association Chat and the association community. And I want to thank all of you. I want to thank my wonderful guest, Jeff Cagna, my dear friend, Jeff Cagna, who I hope we can find some time to catch up very soon.
Yes.
And without all of you watching or listening. And then I want to also say thanks to all of you for participating, for listening, to supporting, and in whatever channel you happen to partake of Association Chat. I truly hope you enjoyed the show. If you like the show, subscribe to the Association Chat Amazon Echo Flash briefing. That's pretty exciting. That's something that I'm trying to update several times a week, not quite daily, but several times a week. And it has been a fascinating joyride for me to be finding a new channel to use. And then also be sure to like, thank, subscribe, and do all the things to share the love. And until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure